there was never a point where it was like I've got this problem and Sketchnotes will solve it. It was very much kind of an organic process. Like I want to retain this information, and I want to have fun with the illustration part of it.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily from Sketchnote Academy, and today I'm talking with Paul Mignard of what you might know as Sketchy Sermons. So I'm a big fan of Paul's iconic black and white sermon sketch notes, and I wanted to talk with him today. So Paul, tell us a little bit more about yourself and tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, my name is Paul Mignard. I run Sketchy Sermons, a Christian art account. I'm based in Lynchburg, Virginia. It's not my full-time job. For full-time work, I do web development. I own a really small company that does a lot of government contract type stuff. But on my off hours, I draw Christian art. It's funny you mentioned black and white because just this morning I published a piece that had orange in it for the very first
Yes.
time. I know. So it's funny how little like, oh, I made this one thing orange and people are actually commenting on it. So, but yeah, that's what I do.
Awesome. Well, how did you get into sketchnoting? Like, how long have you been doing this? And I think yours are more like illustration with like sketch notes like integrated. Like when I see your stuff, I'm like, oh, it's like sketch notes, but then it's like way more illustrated than most people do. So like, how did you get into sketchnoting? Tell us your origin story.
Well, I don't have a formal background in illustration. So like I said, most of the work I do is web development. I did get a reputation for being an artist of sorts. So when I would be in dev meetings or things like that, I would be the scribe. So I would have to go up to the whiteboard and draw this stuff out. And then I would add things like octopuses and coffee cups, and that seemed to go over really well. And I've always kind of been a doodler. So any work, if you go to like my personal Instagram and you see my work, I have those kind of like doodle pages where it's just pages full of just innocuous stream of mind kind of stuff. But I started seriously sketchnoting in church because I would find myself specifically in church week after week, not really paying attention to what was said. Like we'd get our kids out of kids church and like, oh, what did you learn? And I learned this. And then they'd ask us and I'd be like, I have no idea. I was just sitting there for like 40 minutes and I have no idea what happened. And if I don't know, like nobody else has taken any notes. So I started doing it as a way to kind of keep my mind a little busy so I could focus on it. But then I kind of ran into your work and Mike Rohde's work. And I was like, oh, wait, this is actually a thing you can do. like it's appropriate draw pictures on your notes and not do the typical college intention kind of thing. So I started doing that. So I had those little moleskin notebooks and I would write notes in there and then kind of doodle and mix them. But after a while, I started actually sharing them. For years, they just lived in notebooks. They didn't really go anywhere. And then I started posting them on social media. And then I got an iPad Pro and started working more digitally and refining. So it's kind of been, there was never a point where it was like I've got this problem and Sketchnotes will solve it. It was very much kind of an organic process. Like I want to retain this information, and I want to have fun with the illustration part of it. So mine, it's funny. I see work like yours and I see other, visual note takers, and it's very intentional, like leading people to a specific point. Where mine, I kind of indulge in the art part of it. Like I'm going to make the information a little harder and I'm going to make the art stand out a little more, because nobody's paying me to do it and I enjoy it. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm at now. Although now I find myself like, okay, maybe I need to rein back the art a little bit because sometimes it overtakes the message completely.
You mentioned your iPad Pro. I was like diehard analog sketch notes all the way. And I had an iPad for years and I never used it for sketchnoting because I felt like the jump from paper to digital was really hard and it just wasn't the same. And I was a lot slower digital than I was paper. So what was your experience going from paper to digital?
I was pretty versed with digital. So I used to have like way back in the day, like the Wacom 3 tablets, like the table tablets. Because I used to be a Flash developer before Adobe killed it, but it required a lot of actually drawing in the program. And so I was pretty comfortable with doing that. There was a weird almost like a dark ages part though, where before the iPad Pro came out and when Wacom was still the ruler of everything, it was like, well, I'd like to get into this, but I don't have $2,000 to drop on a Cintiq. So I got the first iPad Pro, the 9.7 inch with the Apple Pencil, and it was actually really good because I had tried before, like they had Bluetooth styluses that you could use, but they were always kind of terrible and never worked. And when that came out, it was like, I can actually use this thing. So I've kind of followed the tech along. I actually have to buy a new iPad. I filled up my current one. Like my Procreate library takes up the entire iPad because I bought the 64 gig. And anyway, it's a thing. So yeah, I found, I'm almost at the point now where I'm like getting rid of all my analog stuff. Like I keep a couple notebooks and a couple brush pens, but I have just these buckets of pencils and Japanese pens that I enjoy trying out that I never touch because I'm just fully in the digital world now. And I just don't, I never really had a good process for doing that. So I still do some doodles. I take a lot of notes, right? So I've always got paper that I'm always scribbling stuff down on all the time. But definitely I'm like 100% digital now, especially with
It's
Procreate.
yeah, it's definitely a lot more transportable and economical. Like some of the pens I buy are like $3 a pen, and you go through them in like a week or two if you're sketching a lot or drawing. And so it's like, it's not like expensive. I can afford a $3 pen every couple of weeks. It's like a coffee, but at the same time, it's like, that's a lot of plastic waste. And so I started thinking about like, well, what's the most like eco-friendly? I'm chucking these pens every 2, 3 weeks. What's the impact of that anyway?
And it only takes one time for a pen to leak in your pants pocket before you're like, all right, I'm done. Like that's, I don't need to mess
Yes.
with this anymore. I'm over it. Like I'm just going to go all digital.
Yeah, for me, it's the flying with a pencil bag and then the pencil bag exploding in the airplane at some point. And you're like, nah, everything is ruined.
Right. Yeah. Or when you pull out the sharpener, like the lead sharpener, and the person next
Yes.
to you is like, oh, great. I get to sit next to like,
So when
that's
you sit
funny.
in church and you're sketching, do people know you as like the sketch guy now? Or like, what was that like? Do people come up to you and then you tell them who you are and they're like, oh, I've been following your work. Do you have any of those kind of interactions?
It's funny because I really started getting serious about it when COVID started. So like when the church, that's when it really started to become a thing. So I have at one point because I have like one Sketchy Sherman shirt, like I did a test, like, oh, let me try this out, and somebody recognized me in Chipotle, and I felt like like I'm walking out like make way, here comes the Sketchy Sermons guy, and that was really cool. I mean, it is really cool when somebody recognizes the art for or the message, because it's like I try not to, I don't want to necessarily make art for art's sake. I did that for a while where it's like, look, here's my picture of Captain America and here's my picture of a squid, and it's like I don't know. I like the art with a purpose a little bit more, where it's communicating a message, and people seem to identify that with that more, especially if I'm quoting somebody or from, making some statement about what's going on during the day. People seem to do that, seem to
Yeah.
identify it with a lot more. So it's certainly, yeah, it's definitely more fulfilling to have people say something about it. But I don't know if I'm recognized at church as I go to a pretty large church. It's
Right.
Thomas Road here in Lynchburg. So I don't know if I've been outed yet, but we'll see.
It's only a matter of time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Has your church ever used them or like reposted them, or has the church itself contacted you?
They've been, they have been really supportive. Like they'll share them. I post them to my Sketchy Sermons account. There's a, private Facebook group that I put them to. So,
Cool.
they share it and they usually comment and they think it's pretty cool. So, but as far as use it, like, not really. And, I haven't, I've kind of just compiled them and put them out there, so but other churches have definitely, I get a lot of requests, it's
Hmm.
and I love surprising churches, so that's been a new thing that I've been doing, where it's like because people, I mean, everybody's sermons online now, so it's almost like just a veritable buffet of content to choose
Yeah.
from. um Man, and I love it when, a pastor will catch it and it's like, what is this? Like, what, what did you do here? I don't even know you. Like, I'm in California and you're in Virginia. So that part's always really, really rewarding.
Do you have an example of your earliest sketch note and like a recent sketch note that you can share with us?
I do. So you had asked me about my earliest one, and so in sure, like moleskin notebooks, and so I've got a number of them. I didn't start saving them though till the earliest one I found was 2015. Yes, yes, exactly. Let me open it up. So the first one that I could find, and I think the earliest one is actually on a tithing envelope, because I think at first I was just
So authentic.
taking those. Right, yeah. So yeah, this one here, I can hold it up and see if you can see that one. And it's definitely like,
Yeah.
you kind of see it's a little traditional. It's just kind of like, oh, here's my notes and I drew things on it. So therefore it's a sketch note. So at some point I started, and I think it was after this when I found your work and I found Mike Rohde's stuff, where it was like, okay, wait, I'm not just taking notes and drawing pictures in there. So yeah, that one is the earliest one I could find, aside from the errant, tithing envelope that's out there. I'll show you my latest one. Let me switch views here because I think I had it up. Yeah, so
Oh, I
my
like the
latest,
orange.
yeah, that was the one color. I'll go back to that one. That was the one color. So this is the one I did of the Sunday service, and so this is kind of where, kind of coming full circle. I'm trying to expand a little bit, so this one has like some solid blacks and grays in it.
Yeah.
Used to be, like you said, it used to be all black and white, like no contrast. And I found, as I'm trying to develop my art a little bit more, I'm slowly branching out, whereas some people will go run the whole gamut. They do their pencils, they do their inks, they do the paint, they do the final, blah blah blah. I'm still in that halfway phase of like, okay, I'm still trying to learn how to block colors and do things like that. So
What's your process like?
in church, fortunately I go to a church that publishes its sermon notes. Not
Oh,
every
nice.
church does that. So yeah, I think I got that advice from you. Like, if you can get the notes ahead of time, you can kind of block things out a little bit. So and fortunately my pastor tends to do the 3 to 4 note, sermon block. So it's like you can kind of adjust as you need to. So in church, it's definitely, if I have questions I want answered, or that sounds really demanding. If I have questions, I write those down, versus that I want to hear later. It's almost like a stream of consciousness. Like, all right, my only goal here is I'm just going to keep the pen moving, and I'm going to write down these points, and I'm going to get any kind of relevant information. And then the process from, I pull out the iPad. I'm trying to experiment a little more. For a while there, I kind of had the same format that I was doing. Like, all right, title in the upper left, person in the upper right, content in the middle. So I'm trying to play with that a little bit more. But basically, I do it in the morning. So my daily routine is I get up from 5, and from about 5 to 7, that's my time to draw or write notes or research upcoming Apple events or whatever. And that's generally when I crank that stuff out. So I'll take those notes and I keep some pieces of it. I could show you the paper notes that I took from this last service, like where they started, where they ended. Yeah, so this is from that service that I just showed. So
Oh,
you can kind
cool.
of see, so like this one, I started the kind of block everything out, like, okay, he's going to have 4 points. I kind of embellish the title. Usually, once he says something that kind of hits, like, okay, this is the theme of the message, I'll
Yeah.
try to get that in. Sometimes I have to get it afterwards. So it's a little more of an organic process. It's definitely, I did have somebody ask, they're like, oh, so do you just sit there in the iPad and you just draw that all out in one service? Like, well, no, not at all. Like, there's definitely some time that goes into it to get them to that before I publish them. But that's for those, because I do a mix. So that one's more of a sermon, like I'm trying to capture the whole message. I tend to
Yeah.
do a lot of quotes too. Sometimes the service can be wrapped up in a single quote, kind of like the one I did this morning, where it was like, all right, here's this one thing and it's a banger and I'm just going to focus on that and put that out. And, those are obviously a lot easier. It's just, all right, let me get this person drawn out. Let me get their quote in here and then detail, detail, detail.
How do you like plan your layouts? Because I know you've got like your blocks in front, like you have a lot of layers with your work. You've got like a person and then you've got a box over that. And then there might be a picture over top the box. Like, are you just like a dimensional thinker and it just comes naturally?
Yeah. In a lot of my work, I like to have that effect where everything kind of connects and is layered on top of each other. Procreate obviously makes that really easy. Um, I think that comes more from my, I don't have a cartooning background necessarily, but when I was younger, I definitely, I guess like all 18-year-olds growing up in the early 90s, I wanted to be a comic book artist, right? So, so I took that inspiration from that and kind of brought it forward to what I do now. So yeah, a lot of it's like I just kind of work on one piece at a time. Generally, when I start, I try to find, and I don't remember if you had said this or somebody else did, have the line or the blank canvas in Procreate, and I'll just draw a line like, okay, here's the flow and I'm just going to
Yep.
follow this. And sometimes it's a straight line and sometimes it's like a zigzag. um just really quick, like less than a minute to just kind of block, like, all right, person up here, I'll draw a couple people down here. But I try to have fun with it too. There's a lot of things that don't make sense in my drawings. Like lately I've been doing this thing where like everything's falling apart. Like if you look at this is the one I did this morning, but I'll do these kind of elements like off on the side, like, oh, the whole thing's cracking and falling apart, that kind of stuff where it's like, I don't know, it doesn't make sense. It's fun to draw. And
Maybe it's a
I
sign
kind
of 2020, 2021 when the world feels like it's falling apart.
of right, exactly, right. In my drawing, I've always been more of a detail guy than a structure guy. So I enjoy that part. Like after, you can see here after the body is like kind of blocked out, like, all right, now it's time to focus on folds. Like I'm gonna draw all the folds in the arm. And those are
Yes.
the parts sometimes more than the other stuff. So they tend to get a lot of focus. And that's what I was saying earlier. I was like, oh man, I know there's sometimes where it can overwhelm, like, oh, here's a really great message. And then I just keep putting all these things in there. So I'm trying to tone it down. I'm trying to get to a place where like, okay, make sure the message comes through sometimes. Don't let your art overshadow it. But
Maybe you should. Who knows? Maybe you should be the sketchnoter that art kind of is the main thing rather than the information. You could be like the opposite of Mike Rohde, who's always saying ideas, not art. You could be art and ideas, but more art than ideas.
I know, I know, right? I think I actually said that to somebody before. I'm like, because I quote that a lot because I do get questions. People are like, how do you do it? Like, oh, don't worry. How do I do this? I can't draw, blah, blah, blah. Like, well, it's not about art. It's about the ideas. And
Right.
then I'm like, but the art part is a lot of fun. So you should really enjoy that part of it too. So.
When you're sketchnoting, what is like the tip that you live by or your golden rule, your go-to? Is there like a process or an advice piece that you could offer to other people?
The biggest thing I know for me was to do it and to publish it because I have a lot of overthinking problems where it's like, oh, this would be a really great thing to do tomorrow, and really just executing, making that time, getting it done, putting it out there. I think that's the big thing too, especially with what I'm trying to do because I try to highlight other people. And I just imagine this world where it's like you have a service and thousands of people will see it. And right now it's kind of like you might not really get, as a pastor, you probably don't get too much feedback from it. You could literally speak to the entire world and you get like, 20 likes.
Yeah.
But, this idea of like people coming together, combining their work, and showing like, hey, here's the things that we learned, here's what we could take from this, like here's questions. I don't know, I just see this more interactive community. So yeah, this whole idea of like, it doesn't, I still hold to the idea is not art. So if people are like, oh, but I can't draw a stick figure, like you totally can, it'll be awesome, just give it a shot and put it out there. That's my biggest advice. Just don't wait. And I know for me, a lot of my work, again, I make websites, I work on web stuff, and everything I do is ephemeral. So anything I make just seems to kind of disappear, especially making a living as a Flash developer for 20 years and having Adobe be like, "Hey, we're gonna we're pulling the
Just
plug
kill
on
that.
everything." Right. Yeah. That was definitely, one of those times where it's like, man, I should things out in the world that aren't software that kind of live, more than just, the time that they're there. So
What kind of stuff inspires you?
like I say, growing up in the 90s as a comic book kid, a lot of comic book stuff is really inspiring. The caricature artists are actually really interesting to me. Just the whole idea of being able to have somebody sit in front of you and capture all that information and to be able to reflect it really easily, because it takes me a long time to do that stuff. And for them to do it like that kind of stuff is really inspiring to me. So when I was younger, I used to be really into robots and monsters and stuff like that. But now, like, people who draw people are very interesting to me. And even when I say caricature, I don't mean like the traditional, theme park caricature, that kind of overly exaggerated thing, but people who can draw other people and bring that dimension to it. Like I really enjoy that. It's almost like something I really have fun with now, is looking at people's faces and appreciating, right? So instead of just looking at somebody, like a drawing I was working on this morning is the new Falcon and Winter Soldier, the new Captain America on there,
Oh yeah.
who I think is Kurt Russell's son. Like, who knew?
Oh, he looks
But
like
he's
Casey Neistat.
yes, yeah, exactly. But he's got this really interesting nose because it's got this bridge. Like, don't get me wrong, he's a super handsome dude, but he's
But
got
it's
this like
large.
bridge, right? Yeah, it's really neat. And yeah, he's got that Casey Neistat thing where like the distance between his lip and his nose, or so I don't know. Yeah, when I get inspired is when I see things like that, because now it's like I want to draw that, I want to represent it. And man, I wish he was quoting somebody, and then I could put it on my Sketchy Sermons page. But
I feel like whenever you can humanize your sketch notes and put as many people and as many different kinds of people in them as possible, it's like way more interesting. And I don't know, I think it's just how we're wired as people, as we like other people. So it's like whenever I have the people doing the action rather than like some third party visual metaphor, it's always more effective if I just put people in it. So as I like looking at people and thinking how I would draw them, I just don't feel super confident in my people drawings sometimes. So it's like, all right, stick figure for you.
right, yeah. Well, yeah, personally, that's partially why I went to digital, because you saw, like, I tried to draw my pastor, and I usually do it ink first. Like, I don't use pencil, so it's like the first try never comes out anywhere near
Yeah.
how you'd want it. Like, okay, it resembles a person. However, it's not.
Do you have a story of like a really epic sketchnote fail?
Trying to think live. The worst, this wasn't a sketchbook fail, but one time I was paid to do caricatures at a wedding,
Ooh.
and I'm not a live artist. So, but the money was great. So I was like, you know what? I've got a couple weeks. I can learn how to, I let's just say I
I
was
can figure this out.
overconfident. Yeah, yeah, right. So I had that enterprising, like, can do, like, all right, I'm just going to jump in and do this. And it was like a couple of them, like the first one, and this actually went bad for me. I should have just totally failed the first one, and then everybody would have known. But I feel like the first one I did, like man, I knocked it out of the park. It was perfect. Like, it was actually a good representation of a person, and that was it. Every single one after that was just pain and torment. And it was me watching the clock, like, can I take a break? Can I get out of here? Don't feel like you have to pay me. I'm just gonna walk out the door. So on one hand, it was like it was one of those experiences that made me want to do better. Like, okay, I want to come back again and do. But that feeling of like when you're literally face to face with somebody and it is not going well on your side, like,
You're like, I'm
uh
sorry, here.
right, yeah, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna jump in this trash can over here, just don't
I
go
am
back to the
trash.
party. Right, yeah, exactly.
I had someone recently ask if I could sketch note their wedding, and I just said no. Like, it was tempting.
Mm,
and I asked a few questions, and then I was like, what am I doing? Like, I would have zero confidence going into that situation. And I have a feeling it would go south very quickly. So I was like, nope, I have learned my lesson. If my gut says I don't know what I'm getting into, I just say no and say, sorry, bye,
Oh,
figure it out.
wow.
I've definitely had plenty of I want to run away moments in my professional work at live events. It's like, oh, this is not going well. I'd like to die now, please.
Did you, yeah, did you have one that was like super egregious that?
When I first started, I didn't feel confident enough to be live sketching at events. I was like, I need more training, I need more practice. But honestly, the best way to learn and train and practice is by doing it. And
Mm.
um, the hard truth is that clients think what you do is magic. Your bar of quality is up here, but the client's is way down here. And so from
Ah,
here to here, the client won't tell a difference because it's all magic to them. And it took me a long time to learn that. And so, but the first couple gigs I went to, one lady hated her portrait, which I don't really blame her. She was hard to draw and she made me add glasses because she didn't like her face. And I was like, okay, fine. And then another gig, I think they had hired a graphic facilitator before who just like filled the page. Like there was no white space anywhere. And they had that expectation of me, which I don't do that. I like to have some white space. And they were like, it's so stark. Where's all the information? And I was like, well, I can remember some of it. I'll just go back and write in what I remember in the white
oh,
spots.
wow.
So I've had some nightmare experiences, but like you said, you learn from them and those experiences make you want to get better. And it's like, okay, I'm going to get better at drawing women now because she was really hard to draw. Or, okay, now I'm going to know like how to have that conversation ahead of time of what is your expectation of what kind of deliverable you're going to get. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining me on Sketchnote Chats today. It's been great talking to you. Where can people find you online, learn more about you?
I'm Sketchy Sermons on all the major platforms. My website is sketchysermons.com. I'm mostly active on Instagram, but I will jump to notifications from anywhere.